He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 26 years of experience. Together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing conversation about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back for another episode, Henry, and today we have Reid Holmes. Now, Reid is an old friend. He is my former boss, executive creative director at the now sadly defunct Campbell Mithun, where he was the generator of the idea that maybe you remember, the You Got People campaign for H&R Block. We're going to talk about that, his upcoming book, a couple of other things. Let's join the conversation now.
Let's do that.
We're back with another episode, and I am really excited to have with us today, joining us on the Brief Brothers, an old friend, Reid Holmes. I met Reid in 2007 when I went to work as a freelancer at Campbell Mithun. And I've said this before, it's sadly now defunct. Reid was the executive creative director at Campbell Mithun on H&R Block. And that's how he and I came to know each other. And we've stayed in touch over the years. He has written some wonderful blurbs and added some quotes to my book on the single-minded proposition. And he is also writing a book on branding, which he'll tell us about in a minute. So Reid, it's great to see you again. Thank you for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers. Welcome.
Well, thanks, you guys. It's great to be here. It's good to see you again, Howard and Henry. Great to meet you. And I'm curious to hear what you guys, to get into it.
Yeah, we're going to just start grilling you right now. So one of the things that I've admired most about you is your creative talent. I mean, you're a copywriter and a creative director. And I wanted to share something that I found on your website from a friend of ours. You might remember his name, Steve Warenberg.
Yeah.
He was the CEO at Campbell Mithun when we were both there. And even though the shop shut down some years later, I think he went on to teach, I think, full-time at the University of Minnesota's Hubbard School of Mass Communications and Journalism.
That's right. Yeah.
And now he's retired full-time. I think he's calls himself an aspiring writer. But he wrote a nice review of you for your website, for your profile on LinkedIn. I want to share that with our viewers, because I think this kind of sets up our conversation. I'm going to embarrass you, so just deal with it, Reid.
This is the best money I ever spent.
I had the pleasure to work with a lot of great creative minds at Campbell Mithun, and Reid is among the best. He's smart, strategic, and an idea machine. Reid specialized in creating what Ray Mithun called a pioneering idea, one that worked like a center cog to drive all of a client's communication elements and ultimately their sales and profits. Bob Garfield of Ad Age called his award-winning work for H&R Block, You Got People, the best-selling idea he'd seen in a long time. When we needed to win a big one, I always wanted Reid by my side. Pretty nice words.
Nice. I hadn't seen that in a while, but yeah, it's nice of him to say all that.
And that's really when I got to know you, working, with Diane Aronson and Tim Holmes, who, as I said to you a moment ago, he's going to be our guest tomorrow.
My brother from another mother.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you, You Got People is an iconic campaign. It's now 16, 17 years old, something like that.
2006 was when we pitched it.
Yeah.
2007 was its first year out. So with this past tax season, it'd be 15 years since it came out. Yeah.
One of the things that I learned after I left Campbell Mithun, and Campbell Mithun lost that account to an agency who will go unnamed. I don't even remember who it was, but we're just going to forget about it. I learned that the direct campaign that David Hodges and I worked on lived on. They didn't change much of anything. Did you hear about that? Did you know that?
I did not, but I do know that the new agency also redid the campaign that had been done prior to us having to repitch and win with You Got People. And they even used the same director. So
wow.
Yeah.
what does that tell you about the reasons that you lost, that Campbell Mithun lost the account?
I think it was, I don't know. You never know, right?
Yeah.
But that campaign drove 3 straight years of double-digit percentage growth for them. When I would go down there to talk with them, I would get quite a warm welcome.
Yeah, I imagine.
Particularly since tax season winds up around bonus time. So I was just like, I guess what we're doing might be working here.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, and this is interesting because all three of us have worked on that account. I find it, but Howard and I have talked about how clients are obsessed with shiny objects, right? Like you have something that's working, that makes sense, that's differentiating, frankly, like you've got people, right? And particularly, I'm not going to pretend that H&R Block wasn't facing headwinds, right? Like with the movement towards self-preparation, TurboTax and all that, for sure. But if their whole model for many, many years depended on their storefront tax model, you've got people is just as relevant today as it was when you launched it. But they use an idea up for a year or two, and then it's like, what's the next? And frankly, consumers don't move that quickly. Like, we remember it because we're in the business, but consumers, you need to really drill a campaign into them for several years. And if it's a good campaign and it makes sense and it lodges something in their mind, why would you ever want to walk away from that equity? And that's one of the big, and that's why, by the way, I respect agencies when they come in and get a piece of new business that aren't afraid to say, hey, this thing that you were doing before was working. Let's keep on with that, but here's a new wrinkle to it, or
Yeah. No, it's funny because part of what made You Got People such a big idea for them was it was that time of convergence between online tax prep was really starting to come into its own in 2007. There was still a lot of CD-ROM sales. And of course, they had something like 90,000 tax pros in these junky strip malls that and all of whom had felt like they had been depositioned by all these different tools and made fun of. And so when we started to say, You Got People, we started to hear from employees that are going, wow, you're giving us credit for what we do. And when you think about these other, what do you call it, online or CD-ROM tax prep, the nice thing about You Got People is it said you're not just by yourself with these things. You have a place to turn if you have a question. And so that's one of the things I think that made that so successful in the marketplace. The reason that it changed, I think, Henry, to your point, is pretty true. They got tired of it before the market got tired of it. But there were other inner workings going on. The company was being kind of hostilely bought by a guy who ironically used to work for McDonald's. It was just funny. He used to walk around the last year of the campaign. We could tell he just was like, even though we were delivering huge financial results, he thought that, it was a classic example of someone coming in and thinking they know what will drive a business. And one of the fundamental things that we knew about the business is that it's not about accuracy, it's about getting my money. And he basically said goodbye to us. And the next year they came out with a campaign done by not by the next agency that got it, which was back in Minneapolis, but they went to an agency, I think in New York or something. And I think their tagline became "Get It Right." And just went way down, sales went way down. And the reason that, any of us on the team that worked on that could have told him and tried to tell him, that's not going to work. It's just not, people don't care about accuracy. They do, but they want their money back,
Quickly.
Yeah. Accuracy is kind of like, it's kind of like Chevy saying our cars start. Well, of course your car starts, It's not what everybody's car starts. I get that. You guys are going to be accurate, just like any tax prep should be, right? But I want you to work harder for me for what I got coming. Anyway, he didn't understand that. And they kind of took a big dip after us, as I understand it. But then, I don't know how they're doing nowadays. I mean, they had a campaign a couple of years ago with singing and dancing, and it was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of brands have gone that route. I know I used to work on Lexus, which had the iconic tagline,
Oh, that was some
relentless
beautiful
pursuit
work.
of perfection. And now
Yeah.
the tagline is experience amazing. Mm. Yeah. There's something else that I think maybe you would relate to, Reid, or maybe you have some experience in having talked to some folks about this. I do creative brief writing training for the ANA, among other, as well as on my own. And before the pandemic, I did a lot of traveling. And I went up to San Francisco and did a training for a very well-known tech company whose name I can't reveal because of, I work for the ANA. But anybody would
Well,
recognize.
San Francisco narrows it down.
Yeah, it does a little bit. But I happen to have worked on a campaign for this particular brand 20 years earlier when I was freelancing at Ogilvy in LA.
Interesting.
And when I showed up at their offices to talk to them about the creative brief training, I said, oh, I used to work on your campaign. And I gave them the name of the campaign, and not a person in the room had ever heard of it. No one had been there for more than 5 years.
Wow.
So anything that preceded their tenure was just not even part of their thinking. So now you and I and Henry have touched the H&R Block business at some points in our career. Now, you and I worked together on this 15, 17 years ago. We know the campaign, as Henry said, when you're in the business, you know the inside stuff. Have you had any experience with people who, when you share with them, I did the You Got People campaign, they have no idea what you're talking about?
Oh, I don't offer it up.
Probably a good thing.
I just thought, even if I had done the most interesting man in the world, I wouldn't go into meetings going, I did the most interesting man in the world campaign. I mean, it's just not something, it's not in my nature to try and fish for that kind of stuff. So, and there are times when it's come up and someone has brought it up, or someone has mentioned, hey, he was involved in that, and I get some nice kudos, but I don't go harvesting that kind of stuff myself. So.
Oh, I get that, and that really wasn't the nature of my question. I'm just wondering if you've experienced this. Henry and I have talked about amnesia, or just complete lack of brand knowledge.
Yeah,
among other things. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I think our industry isn't long on institutional memory. I think it's a big problem in our industry, and I've mentioned fleetingly here on the podcast that if I were a CMO of a company, of a brand, I would establish a position of brand historian. Yeah. And that brand historian would be not only somebody who collected like the advertising, but also the strategies, and would be a marketer, would be somebody knowledgeable that could then tell, onboard new employees, say, this is how the brand was born. This is what our communications look like, what we were trying to do. These are the innovations that happen. This is how the audience has changed over the years. This is how the thinking has changed over the years. And so that you could see the A to B to C to D of the history of the brand. And I think that only helps whoever is creating currently to know where it's been, because in a way, people's interactions with brands are like stories that we sometimes intersect with at moments. And so if you can do something that doesn't necessarily clash with a memory that you might have of a brand, or something that you associate with a brand, but rather builds on a memory or an association you have with a brand, I think that's a powerful thing. And it's so underutilized because everything is about like, the here and now. What's the latest, social media app that I can, there's not enough focus on the past, too much on the shiny object of the current.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of ego involved with CMOs who, if they were to bring back an idea, that might have existed in the past for a brand, they might be seen as not being original or not, I don't know, maybe doing their job. I don't know. You know, however, when you, and the other thing I'll mention to your point is, I think a lot of the folks running, working at agencies these days, you know, agencies have gone through such a squeezing that a lot of those people with that institutional knowledge are unceremoniously gone. And so you've got a lot of these younger folks who may or may not have learned about these things in school. You know, great campaigns. I don't know if they're teaching about great campaigns or great advertising classes like they used to. I think a lot of it's, I mean, my analogy is it's kind of like it's all about the plumbing now and not the architecture. You know, everybody's looking to figure out, where can we interrupt people? Where is, well, we know this person from this data point that we got from this cookie.
We have to use TikTok. We have to get an influencer. We
Yeah,
have
and
that.
so
That's the plumbing. It's not the idea. It's not the,
exactly. It's not about an idea anymore. And that's unfortunate. And that's part of why I'm writing this book, because what brands are doing now, I shouldn't even call them brands, because they're just marketers. They're just companies with products. You know, a brand has staked an emotional place in your head and heart. Products are just rational solutions to immediate problems. So if you really want to become a repeat or have a repeat customer, or have or command a higher profit margin, or even have a community of people who really believe in you and can evangelize your message and your meaning and your you know, your product, you need a brand. And the beauty of a brand is because it has that meaning, it has some track has been laid into your customers' mental garages, so to speak, where there is already space there that's caring about what you're saying. It's caring about what you believe in. It's you know, Patagonia is a good example. You know, that brand is pretty inexorably tied to environmentalism. And if you care about environmentalism, then Patagonia has a pretty sweet little entry into your mental space, so that you can put some consideration against what they mean and what they mean in the marketplace, and what they can mean as a badge for you in your life. But
let's talk about your book, Reid. You mentioned that you're working this book. Let's talk about this. Tell us about what's the title of the book? What's the premise of the book? You know, tell us where you are in the process.
Well, the title of the book is tentatively called Brand Gratitude: How to Break Through in an Age of oh God, no. You got me. I have,
you got the title.
I've had so many
Brand
different
Gratitude.
titles. I've had so many different titles. Anyway, it's how to stand out and matter in an era of mass distraction and supply saturation. So what you have here is all these people and all these companies and all these kind of one guy in the banjo selling stuff on Amazon. They're not building brands. They're just interrupting us to sell us something that might be kind of interesting, and you don't even know what the quality is. You know, that's the beauty of a brand, is that because they've been around and because they're known and trusted, the extra money that they might command is a worthy exchange, because the risk has been removed for the customer, because they just don't know if it's going to be any good or not. But so this notion for this book, and thank you for asking, it's been a real journey trying to write this, because I really want it to be valuable, and I don't want it. I find myself when I'm writing it just going off into having these kind of fits of fun and attitude and stuff, and I'll go back and read it, and it'll be like, God, I just look like an asshole that I just wrote 3 pages like in that kind of voice, you know. But anyway, so that's what's taking so long. I'm very sensitive to this because I've been working on it for a long time, but I really wanted to deliver value. But the genesis of this idea was I was working, I think I left Kalamazoo a couple years before the new folks came in, and it kind of flew into a mountain. And one of the last things I pitched and we won was Mayo Clinic. And Mayo Clinic was looking for they're looking for a campaign that would increase appointments. And I'm sitting there going, well, I'm not going to be the creative director that puts out a commercial for Mayo Clinic. It says call 1-800 Mayo Clinic right now for an appointment. It's just like the stature of that brand is just above that. It's just not, you know. So so we started thinking, well, what can we do? What makes sense here? And at the time, there was a lot of possibility, there still is, with digital and platforms. And I've always been one of those people that believes products should tell you how good they can make you, not how good they are. It's better to make a hero out of your customer and be a guide for them than to tell them you're a hero and have them go, yeah, I don't think so. You got to make people better versions of themselves. And that's the way I've always approached what I do. So as a creative director and a writer. So we looked at this, this assignment, and it came, the idea was basically, gosh, you know, everybody who doesn't go to Mayo thinks that they just can't because it's out of reach. This was 10 years ago. Because you have to be a rock star or a you know, a Saudi prince or, you know, some movie star to get any attention there, because it's probably expensive and it's hard to get in there and whatever. And we're like, well, we can tell people that, and, you know, in a commercial or in whatever. But one of the metrics, one of the pieces of data, I don't mean to use up all of our time here, but
no, this is a great story.
One of the pieces of data that came in was that 97% of the people who went to Mayo wanted to tell others about the experience. They wanted to tell others that it was different, that they got an answer, and that they felt like they were listened to and cared for. And so we looked at that and we just said, well, gosh, you know, why don't we cut these people loose? I mean, if 97% of the people who go there want to tell others about it, let's figure out a way to help them do that. So we created a kind of what I'd call a Facebook for health. It was called Mayo, we called it Mayo Mentors. And the idea was we'd create a community online for Mayo Clinic that allowed people who didn't think they could go there or didn't know enough about it or wanted to figure out from someone who shared their same ailment. Maybe it's a plantar fasciitis or some kind of ailment, whatever health issue. And they could go at least talk to them and say, hey, I've got this thing too. I can't get an answer anywhere. I wish I could go to Mayo. Well, you can. Here's how you do it. My doctor's name was so-and-so. And in other words, it becomes a much more organic opening of the door to create these appointments. Now, of course, we did a bunch of work that advertised what ended up being called Mayo Connect. We did TV, radio, print, digital, all kinds of stuff, magazine, and it shot up and it exceeded their first year's goals in the first quarter that had come out. And their appointments shot up, and all the things that they asked us to do for them happened faster than they could have imagined. And part of the reason I think for that was we created a piece of utility for them. And when I look at that and I go, gosh, if I'm a customer, what makes me appreciate this brand? And it's that they did something for me that makes me grateful they're there. It makes me grateful that they figured out a way to help me, as opposed to just talking about themselves. They figured out a way to communicate to me that I need, or that what I need is solvable by them. And so it was pretty cool. I mean, this whole thing got written up in the New York Times, and it got a lot of positive press. But the bigger deal to me was when I look back on that, I thought, gosh, you know, after I left CM and started freelancing and worked in a few other places, you know, I kind of had that midlife kind of moment where I was just like, I just don't want to go do this ephemeral crap anymore. It's just, I've done 5,000 commercials. I don't need to do another 3. I'd like to find a way. I'm looking at my kids who 3 years ago were teens. They're still kind of older teens now, but and I look at them and I go, what kind of world are they inheriting? And what can so is there something I can do with my skill and my experience that might make the world a better place and might create something that isn't so ephemeral, but is truly of value for a longer period of time? And this notion of brand gratitude came to me. And as I thought about it, I happened to be working at another agency called the LASIK Group. I was running their ag account, Pioneer Seed. And the whole team, as I was a group creative there, and all my folks were like, well, what are we focusing on for the campaign this year? And I said, we need to do something meaningful. I want to do something useful. Let's do something that actually helps, that isn't just saying things, it's doing things. It's like, let's figure that out. So one of the things that we proposed was a Bluetooth enabled cap. These seed companies give out these caps by the bushel-full. And I just thought, well, what if, all these farmers are out in the field and they get a call or they want to listen to a podcast or whatever. What if we could make the cap that they wear anyway more enabled for that? So we proposed that to Pioneer. We proposed partnering with Ford to create a better equipped pickup so that when you're out in the middle of the field, you have potable water, you have a coffee maker, you have a drone. If you want to go fly over your crops and see the video, you have all these things within the truck. And we got very close to working with Ford on that. So this is part of where I go, gosh, if I'm one of their customers, I'm like, thank you for thinking of this. Thank you for not just trying to sell me something, but actually helping me be a better version of myself. And that's kind of the roots of the idea. So I've spent the time since trying to figure out how can this be crystallized so that it's really simple and understandable. And you might be able to tell I'm still trying to really do that. And how can it be turned into a kind of a turnkey strategy? Like, is there a brand gratitude brief, for example? Is there a way to write a brief that would result in work or an idea that would instill or aspire to earn appreciation and gratitude from customers? So that's kind of the gist of it.
Well, you're kind of doing our work for us here, Reid, by transitioning into the topic of the brief for us. But we appreciate that. That's a great story, and it kind of prompts a lot of questions, and I'm not really sure where to go about it. So in other words, this idea was kind of sitting in the back of your mind, and then this work with Mayo, and then your work at LASIK, and I have some friends at LASIK too, by the way.
Yeah.
Brought it to front of your mind, and I've had the pleasure of reading a couple of chapters that you've posted on LinkedIn. It's been a while since I've read them. So I've seen you. Well, I've seen the evolution of this book, and I know you've been working on it for a while. But having written a couple of books myself, I know that it's an ongoing process. It takes a little bit of time. So kudos to you, first of all, for plunging in and doing it. I'm eager to read the finished product.
Well, I'll probably ask you for a quote, just like that's me. So,
okay, happy to.
And you too, Henry.
Are you familiar with some of the other marketing mavens out there who are talking about things like brand purpose? And, Henry and I talk a lot about Byron Sharp and his, how brands grow and the notion of mental availability. There seems to be a lot of not bells and whistles, but, and I don't want to say trends, but ideas floating around on how to, build a brand. Do you find this meshing in nicely, or is this a competitive? Is this something separate? Is this unique? What's your take on it?
I'm familiar with Byron. I've literally got his book. I've referenced it a few times to try and steer away from it because, for a couple of years, I partnered and kind of became a partner at an agency where we went out and we actually created a research study that proved out that the higher the level of gratitude people have for your brand, the higher their level of loyalty. So we've proven that with research. We went out, we had our deck all ready to go, and in February of 2020, we were like, let's go get some business around this idea. And then, you know, COVID came along, and we didn't quite get the traction that we wanted. We came very close with a couple of very big brands, but then it's kind of like, yeah, we really want to do this, but they cut our budget and we can't do anything. So I ended up, you know, having to obviously go get another day job, and but it's still very important to me, and it's still something I want to get out there. Is it like other things? To the extent that I'm familiar with them, and I have tried to be, but I've also tried to not be, because I want to make sure I'm thinking about this in an original way from my experience. And so, is it is the brand building world crowded? Probably. But I think what's happening now is that the world has, the building of a brand is just not what it used to be. I mean, what's that quote? The future is not what it used to be. And, you know, it used to be a one-way conversation where you could say what you believed in, and that's what you were. You know, you could say, I'd like to teach the world to sing, and we're all about, you know, togetherness and community, and we're all singing and drinking our Cokes on a hill, and that's what we are. But people can call bullshit on that stuff now. And so one of the biggest things that motivated me about this was a couple things. Number one is, yes, I think, to your point, Howard, over the years, this has been brewing in one way or another in my head. And part of that is because I've always espoused that saying, don't tell me how good your product is, tell me how good your product makes me. And that's critical, you know. All the best work you've ever seen follows that, you know, that, I don't want to call it a formula, but that truth, you know, because that's really the truth to getting a brand built, getting appreciation for a brand, and getting differentiation from other products of the same ilk. I mean, look at Snickers, you know, you're not yourself when you're hungry. They insert themselves as the solution to that tension, right? So, so I think that to your question, I hope this is unique. I hope it's different. For me, it's a bit of a mission, because I want to try and do something positive. We do get this lumped into the purpose side of the ledger in some ways. And I think a lot of people look at purpose with a bit of an skewed look, because they think it's just, I don't know, you know, a lot of CEOs will say, well, isn't our purpose to make money? You know, and they're not wrong. And that's part of the thing is,
but the opposite side of that is, you know, when you have like a Starbucks thinks that they're going to bring world peace, you know, it's like, it's too far and disconnected and absurd from, you know, there's nothing wrong with making a good cup of coffee that gets you off to a good start in the morning.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of marketers have become enamored with this brand purpose thing, because frankly, they're embarrassed at a cocktail party to say that they're a marketer and that they hawk goods to other people. And like I said, I think it's reached the point of absurdity in a lot of ways. I think there is a difference between what you're talking about, right? Which is give the consumer something that is useful to them, and they will be grateful, and therefore they will be more likely to open their mind to you and their wallet to you on a repeat basis.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
You know,
does this mean they're going to have a conversation with you? No, I don't think so. I
think that, you know, brands who come talk to us, you know, engage with us. It's like, give me a break.
I would beg to differ though on one point, and it's not to have a debate or to be disagreeable, but I think there's a lot to be said for the model you talked about, where the product or the brand makes the person better. But I think there are occasions and there are situations where it's merited to talk about the virtues of a brand or a company. And the example I'm going to give is, frankly, it's interesting because when you were talking about Mayo Clinic, I worked on the Cleveland Clinic here in South Florida. They have a Cleveland Clinic in Weston, which is west of Fort Lauderdale. And it was a very interesting problem that they had at the time. They had created this Cleveland Clinic branch in South Florida, but they didn't have a hospital. It's very difficult to get a hospital license. So they decided to do a joint operating venture with Tenet Healthcare that had a hospital that was coming in Weston. So bottom line is, they had the clinic, and then they had the clinic hospital that was a separate entity related, but it was a joint partnership. So what they wanted to do was create a brand for the Cleveland Clinic outside of the tentacles of their Tenet Healthcare partner, like to really build up the brand of the clinic. And people just, unlike in Minnesota, people weren't familiar with the Cleveland Clinic and what it was, what it did. And so, you know, as the strategist, I did the research, we met with the people, we interviewed them, and when we talked to them, and what I found was that they have a very unique way of delivering healthcare, which probably isn't that unique to people that are accustomed to things like the Mayo Clinic. But if you're accustomed to just the standard operating procedures for healthcare here in South Florida, and this has always been a big healthcare hub, because of our elderly population. We've always had a retiree population, so there's a lot of healthcare down here. And what we found was people are frustrated with the state of healthcare. Everything is confusing. Everything is overcomplicated. You go to one doctor, you got to fill out all these forms. Then he refers you to another doctor. You got to fill out the same damn forms. They don't share information. And so we came up with a strategy, which was, you know, Cleveland Clinic is healthcare, is medicine the way it ought to be. And so our creative director, actually, that was the strategy line. The creative director loved it, and he made it the tagline, which isn't the moral of the story, but it's obviously something that I'm proud of when, you know, your thinking gets put into the advertising. But we had like ads like, you know, 100 physicians, 40 specialties in a building, not a directory, right? We had a stopwatch on a billboard that said, one instrument you won't find in our doctor's offices. You know, specialist referrals across the hall, not across the city. So it was basically the answer to all of these problems that people were seeing and feeling in healthcare was the Cleveland Clinic. So I only bring it up because I think there's more than one way to slice the apple, right?
No, I don't disagree. And, you know, I think that there is part of what I'm talking about is about how a company can make you a better version of yourself is part of what you've done with that, because you've macheted out all this crap that they don't have to deal with now, and they can go in and actually get a solution. So, so that's made that, I mean, there's a lot of gratitude to be earned there, because now you've made it easier for them.
Save time, cut red tape, etc.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I think that brand gratitude is the rebuttal to brand purpose. Brand purpose is too much about pounding my chest and saying how good I am. And brand gratitude is the exact opposite of it. It's not how good I am. It's what I can do for you. It answers the question, what's in it for me? Why should I choose you? And you're saying, well, this is how I can make your life better. So that's what's intriguing to me about your concept, and why I'm so eager to read your book. And, you know, I mean, one of the reasons why we want to talk to you today.
Well, yeah, that's great. I mean, to me, purpose is just so easily discarded as, you know, a brand trying to earn goodwill by doing something that isn't profit motive driven. But I don't think being profit motive driven is mutually exclusive from doing good things in the world. And in fact, that's kind of the premise of this book.
Didn't Milton Friedman say that?
You know, I wrote a piece on LinkedIn about brand purpose, and one of my big beefs with it is brands grafting on some sort of purpose they're masquerading. And to me, it does two things. One, it accelerates the natural tendency that consumers have to be jaded about brands, because now that everybody is saying that they're going to save the world, that they're for world peace, that they're diversity, equity, and include, whatever it is, the issue of the day, they're embracing it, and it becomes a transparent effort to basically Me Too. And then the other part of it that I don't think gets thought about a lot, which is there are a few brands that are truly purpose driven. Like, so the example I gave in the piece I wrote was Tom's shoes, right? Like, so Tom's shoes, you buy a pair of shoes goes to somebody that doesn't have a pair, right? That's always been the purpose of the brand. That's the way
their
it was.
business model.
But when everybody is masquerading as having brand purpose, the people that get outshouted and get lost in the shuffle are really the brands that have a true brand purpose, and nobody believes anything anymore that they hear.
Yeah, it's brand purpose gets misassigned to what is what I think people sometimes think is brand altruism. And in other words, well, this brand is doing something nice for others, therefore I should think higher of it. I guess that's true, but at the end of the day, a brand's real job is to attract you to buy it as a solution that will bring a solution or some kind of repeated experience to your life. I mean, that's kind of what products are, right?
We can blame Simon Sinek for this.
Right.
You know,
right.
8-minute speech or whatever that he gave. I mean, you could see like marketers drooling about how they want to be associated with a brand that has some higher purpose. And really, he was speaking to insecure marketers who gobbled it up. That's my take on it.
Well, here's one of my best examples of one of the things that really inspires me about wanting to get this book written. And this is a case you guys have probably heard of. And if you haven't, look it up. And if you have, humor me here. But there's a brand of all things, of all commodities in the world. And this is where I think brand gratitude might have more traction, which is in the mature categories that are truly commoditized. Laundry detergent. So in India, there's a brand called Ariel detergent. And maybe a lot of people listening to this will be like, oh yeah, I've heard that one referenced a lot. Maybe not. But back in 2014, I think it was, Unilever had Ariel. I think there was another Procter & Gamble. Maybe it was Procter & Gamble. I can't remember. But it was Procter & Gamble had a brand in the mix, and Unilever had a brand in the mix. Surf versus Ariel, and they had spent years, these years, one of them spends a little more and they get some incremental lift, 0.4% or whatever. Then the next year, we're gonna get them this year, and they get another 0.5% lift, and and it's just this arms race based on budgets. And there was a point where Ariel got some data that they realized, wow, this is something we should get behind, because this is important. And to my point of what I think great creative briefs find a tension that the brand can be at the center of releasing, right? So Ariel found this tension where in India, most of the kids growing up still believe that it was their mother's job to do their laundry. And this was 2014, which is not that long ago. And so they came up with Ariel said, wait a minute, why can't we all help? And they created this campaign they called Share the Load. They had hashtag Share the Load. They had commercials that dramatized this, told stories about how this is the way it is, and that's just not right, They did all kinds of things. They printed on their boxes calendars so that depending on what day it was pink or blue, it was like the husband or the wife, so it's kind of like, it's not my job today kind of thing. This is my day off from laundry, whatever you want to call it. Guess how much sales went up? 76%.
Wow.
76%.
ROI.
And you know why? Why I believe that is because all of their customers and the people they wanted to be customers were saying, thank you for providing some air cover for us. You know, we have lived under this societal expectation, and as much as we tell our families and spouses and whatever that, you know, can you do a load for a change? To have a big brand like that come out and say, hey, come on, let's give them a break. That
Yeah, let's do a little transition here, Reid, from brand purpose to Reid Holmes purpose. How do you like that for a segue? You recently took a new job in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
at IWCO
Yes.
Direct,
Yep.
as the executive creative director.
Yep.
And this is you and I both have this understanding that direct response and branding have a lot more in common than maybe the general perception out there. And that may not be an accepted perception. I know when I used to work at Team One Advertising, and when Tom Cordner was my boss, he used to come into my office and ask me, how are things in direct marketing? DRECK. He never got tired of making that joke with me. It's like, yeah, I nod. I said, things are great. Thanks, Tom. You know, F you.
I remember that. That's funny.
So tell me, what has this been like? What has it been like? How are you enjoying this job? What are the challenges like? Is it as different from your work in branding as you might have perceived? Correct the misperception in the world for us of what branding and direct marketing are really like.
Well, I think branding is kind of, branding is like the Air Force, and direct marketing is the Army. So you've got to have someone coming in and clearing, you know, the recon, whatever. Let them know you're there. Let them know you've got something to say and something coming. And then you've got to get in there in that one-to-one way and say, you remember what we said about us in that commercial or whatever? Well, here we are, and we can be a solution for you. And that's kind of to me, the way that I think that they interact. Performance marketing, one-to-one marketing, whatever you want to call it, always does better when it has that air cover of branding. It just always does. I mean, if you look at you've heard of Mark Ritson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's got some Effie videos where he just dissects some of these things. Like the Dove case is fascinating because they came out with the campaign for Real Beauty, which I cite as a gratitude earning campaign, because it's like, your daughters don't need to think you have to be a supermodel to be loved. But they also do performance marketing of like, look, I'm putting this test strip on this bar of soap and on this one on this bar of soap, and look at how it disintegrates this other one, but ours is, you know, it's that what I would call dreck, whatever you want to call it. It's not artful, the kind of stuff where, you know, people go, oh, you did that talking baby commercial or whatever, you know. It's different, but it drives results. And again, they are mutually dependent on each other if you really want to get the best results in the marketplace. I've spent most of my career in branding. I was shocked as anybody to get a call that they wanted me to come talk to them at this place. And the reason they did was a couple things. I did do some work. I worked at Ogilvy in Chicago in their, even though I was hired as a general market copywriter, I did some one-to-one work there. So I wasn't complete. And of course at LASIK, there was a lot of that. So there was some experience there that they, you know, I'd say I was 10% of my experience was that. And so I was kind of like, well, why do you guys want to talk to me? Because I'm a brand guy. And they're like, well, a couple of things. We're expanding and building an agency on top of what is essentially a 50-year-old direct mail printing company. Biggest mailer in North America, 4 billion pieces a year.
Wow.
But as you might imagine, with data and with performance metrics and ROI and ROMS and all that, they can't just be a printer anymore, because they can add value by being, kind of data whisperers and try to help you take that one control that's doing the great and beat it for the next time, and so and so and so and so, and build up. So that's what they do. And that's something that, while I can do and can be engaged with and can help with, it's not what I've always done. The second part of that is the part where they said, well, we're building this agency on top of this business, and we need someone to help us build that agency. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's different. That's not just doing direct marketing. You need to define yourself as a brand, and you need to figure out how to expand from just doing direct mail to more of a multi-channel approach, because that stuff all works together to lift everything up. And so that's what attracted me to it. So that's what I'm doing now, and I find it very fun. The team is great. When I was freelancing or just kind of going out and between LASIK and this, you miss having a team of people, and you miss kind of being on the battlefront and trying to take that next hill, to be cliched and whatever. But you do miss that, and you miss just joking around. The irony is that we only work in the office a couple days a week. Most of the stuff we do is like this, is on a Zoom call or whatever. But still, it's nice to have a team of folks, and be able to give certain assignments to people that can do great on it, and others can do great on it. And that's part of the fun of being a creative director, is just trying to find ways to set people up for success. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
That does. That's a great job. So do you have a target date for the new book?
Yes, it was last week.
I know how you feel.
It's just, I'd like to have it done by the summer, but every time I put a date down, I get back into reading. Like I spent a ton of time writing it last fall and this winter, and I got it to a point where one person I know who knows a publisher, and I don't even know how I'm going to get it published, quite honestly. I'd like to talk.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
But a friend of mine knows the publisher who did very well-known author. I can't remember. Anyway, he had just come out with a book, and I thought, wow, this is finally in a place where I can send it to her, and she can read it and tell me, if I'm, what I'm doing here, how I'm doing. And I sent it to her, and actually, kind of, I guess a lucky thing is that I thought I had given her, it's a Google Doc, I thought I had given her permission to go in and read it. But she had sent back via the Google Doc, I can't get into this. So I thought I'd sent her permission. 2 weeks later, I'm writing it, and I'm like, gosh, I shouldn't let her consume this. You can only read a book for the first time once. I'm going to tell her, I hope you haven't read it yet. She said, well, I could never get in. Anyway, my point is, just when I think I've got something, I step away from it for a few days, and I come back to it, and I go, that's not as good as it could be. And I know it's not, part of it is that I want it to be perfect. And I know that, perfection can prevent something that's merely good enough to get out there. But I don't know, I have high hopes for it, and I want it to be as good as possible, because I don't want to waste people's time with something that isn't really valuable. So.
Well, I look forward to reading it, and I will give you my thoughts and a quote for you when the time comes. And it'll probably be a good reason to have you back to talk about the impact that it's had, and go more in depth on your thinking and your philosophy about it. So
great.
Yeah. All right, Reid Holmes, thank you so much for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers. It's been great having you.
It's been great to be here, guys. Thanks. Keep up the good work.
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard IWOC. And together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye-bye.